I am my Savior, I'm happy in love. you're older or my age or whatever, has anybody, I don't call it a guilty pleasure, but has anybody ever watched The Godfather? I'm a movie buff and I like The Godfather. And then some people will be like, why are you watching that? And then now, before you make fun of that, so if you're younger, I mean, like for me, it'd be the same as like The Vampire Diaries, because my wife and my daughter watch that, and I'm like, why do you watch that? And I've seen a little bit on, and I've tried, and I'm like, no. But it's only fair then, because I know my wife's tried to sit through The Godfather before part of it, and she's like, I'm not really getting it. And it's like, why do you watch that? And there's lots of shows like that, right? And it's like, well, why do you watch that? And depending on which show you're talking about, it's like, what makes a good story, right? What makes good characters? What makes a good movie? Are they all perfect? No, that's not why I watch The Godfather. Do they make perfect decisions? Absolutely not. First of all, that doesn't sell, and the show would be over in 2 weeks because all the problems would be solved. Or the movie would be done in a half an hour instead of 3 hours like The Godfather is. So if you're ever sitting down and watching, I'm just warning you, it's pretty long. But imperfect characters, imperfect decisions, which brings about honesty, transparency, redemption, if you would say. I mean, The Godfather, there's people come over from another country to escape their country and come here and try to make a way, and they live in a kind of a crummy place in New York, and then it's bad for everybody, and so he starts helping people any way that he can so that they can survive and whatever, and that's a good story, right? And then eventually that leads to, well, the best way to help people is to do a little crime here and do this and then make that work for good and whatever. And I'm not saying that's the way to go. I'm not saying go rob a store and go help the poor. But that's what the movies are. They take imperfect characters and they do things like that. And they take the worst person on the show all the time, the worst person. And for 2 years, you can't stand them. You don't know if there's any good quality. And then somehow in the third season, they're the good person. And The Godfather, you know he's a criminal, he's a mobster the whole time, but you see the way he helps people. And then in the end, you see why he wants to get out of the business. And he wants the whole second and third movie is him trying to go legitimate and take his money and go completely legitimate. And you get that phrase, every time I get out, they pull me back in. And that's life, right? We want to make good decisions and we want to do that. And then sometimes we make the bad ones. I don't know why, because we like it better or because we're boxed in a corner or whatever it is, but we are imperfect people living imperfect lives. And so we like to see shows and movies and everything that we can relate to. I'm not cracking on the Cosby Show. It was a great show when it was on when I was growing up, but every problem is not solved in 22 minutes on TV. That doesn't sell anymore. It just won't, because we don't believe it. We see it, and yeah, they didn't really get into anything bad, but I don't buy that. So honesty, transparency, redemption, imperfect people, imperfect decisions. It's real. And so as we go through the book of Job, which is another one of those things where people are like, how are you going to preach on the book of Job? Honesty, transparency, real people making unwise decisions, good decisions, all this stuff. That's in the book of Job. And that's why we look at it and read it, because we can relate to it. Whether it's suffering for no reason, whether it's friends saying bad things to do, whatever it is, you're going to see all of it. And it's like, it's real and I can relate to it. I just can. And so I'm not going to knock on anybody in the book too hard, because I can put myself in like every pair of shoes in the book at one time. It just is. And so the first week we talked a little bit about that God and Satan were sitting there, and Job was perfect in all his ways, and God allowed Satan to test Job. Remember, that's the main thing we came on. God didn't test Job. God allowed Satan to test Job. And then we say first, he allowed him to take away his family, his workers, his livestock, his livelihood, and whatever, and Job stood strong. And then Satan said, well, yeah, but you didn't even touch Job. And then, of course, then he allowed Job to be covered with boils, head to toe. And at first, Job still stood strong. He did not curse God. He did not sin. He did not do anything. And that's where we kind of, to pick it up now, well, like we all do, in the Bible, Job has friends. And so we're going to pick up the story where Job has friends. And I got to tell you, at first, it's pretty good. And you're allowed to follow on a little bit. I'm going to cover a lot of verses, and we're going to talk about them. The first little bit is in Job 2, 11 through 13. This is right after Job's covered in boils. And first of all, Satan thinks he's going to curse God, and he doesn't. And he even rebukes his wife. And she says, why don't you curse God? Because look at you. And he says, no, I will not. Will I not accept adversity too, as well as good? And then here comes Job's friends. In verse 11. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, they came each one from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. I'm just saying them like I know how to say them. That's what I do. And they made an appointment together to come and sympathize with him and comfort him. Sounds good. When they lifted up their eyes at a distance and did not recognize him because of all the boils on him, they raised their voices and wept. And each of them tore his robe, and they threw dust over their heads towards the sky. Then they sat down on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, with no one speaking a word to him. For they saw that his pain was very great. So far, they sound like the best friends in the world, right? I'm trying to fix it. They sat with him for 7 days and 7 nights. Sounds like pretty good friends. Then, Job eventually cries out. It would have taken like 1 boil. I would have been like, why is this happening to me? Now, critics of the Bible, or non-Christians, point out all the bad things that happen in the Bible, right? Oh, look what this happened, and look what they did, and look what that, and the Bible says that's okay. And I'm telling you, no, the Bible tells of real people, good and bad. It doesn't sugarcoat it, it doesn't whatever. It's telling real stories about real people. And so the setup for this week is about his 3 friends. And for a good portion of the book of Job, what it is it's Job's first friend talking, and then Job responds. And then Job's second friend talks, and then Job responds. And then Job's third friend talks, and then he responds. This happens 3 times. So there's 3 conversations with each friend. Now, I thought of a bunch of different ways to do this. I could take each conversation with all of them, and I decided to do the people. So, week 1 is his friend Eliphaz. And now that's going to cover the first conversation with Eliphaz, which is only in there because it's written like poetry as 1 poem and then a response by Job. And then we're going to skip the other 2 friends and then go to the second time he talks with Eliphaz and see Job's response, and then skip the 2 friends and then go to the 3rd time, so that we can keep kind of a theme where we're going to look at 1 friend at a time. So we're starting with Eliphaz. And so it's pretty simple because then we're calling it first conversation, second conversation, and third conversation. Because, like I said, real people telling real stories in the Bible. That's why we watch the shows we watch, whether there's anything good in them or not, because it's real people having real talk and doing real things. And so first I'm going to read some stuff in the first conversation. That's basically what it's through. There's like that many chapters. I'm not reading them all. I picked, first of all, I don't know if you're like me, I'm not a poetry guy. So when I see like a chapter of poetry and you have to read through it, and then like later I can pick like 4 ththings out of it I understand, I don't know what the point is, but it's real pretty and a lot of people like it, and so I picked out the highlights of it so that we just don't have to read all the poetry. And in case you're wondering, because people are like, when they say the Bible's literal, it doesn't mean word for word. It means in a historical context, they're saying what they said. And you know what I mean? What they meant to say and what it is. That's what literal means. Not you take it word for word, and that's exactly, because I guarantee you, even back then, they didn't talk to each other in poetry. We don't do it now. They didn't do it back then. But we do it when we write, right? People write in books, and they write this flowery stuff, and we're like, well, people don't really talk like that, do they? Well, no, they didn't either. So don't think that there were people around like thespians talking in poetry to each other, and Job talked, and his friend talked, and they were saying these things. That's not the point. The point is that actual conversations happened, and these were the topics covered. But it's easier to read. I don't know. Some people say it's easier to read because it's in poetry. I would prefer it to be shorter and get to the point, but then it probably wouldn't be as exciting. Same thing with the shows. I can make fun of people on shows. I'm like, oh, that's so dramatic. Why is that in a TV show? But I guarantee you, if they only took 20 seconds to say what they take to say in 15 minutes, the show probably wouldn't be very good, right? We'd be bored and be like, oh, I could have watched a 5-minute TED Talk and got all the same information. So here's the poetry, and in the first conversation, you start to look through Job 4 through 7. And so I skipped a little bit at the beginning there. Here's poetry from Job. So in verses 7 through 8, remember now, whoever perished being innocent, or where were the upright destroyed? According to what I have seen, those who plow iniquity and those who sow trouble harvest it. This is Job's friend now. I told you was a real good friend. Now, he just basically said, doesn't bad things just happen to evil people? And good things happen to good people? That's what he told Job so far. And then he continues in verse 17. Can mankind be just before God? Can a man be pure before his maker? He puts forth no trust in his servants, and against his angels he charges error. How much more those who dwell in the house of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed before the moth. So he's saying even God's angels and servants, when they're not perfect, they get busted. What chance does man have? So he's cracking on Job for saying that he hasn't done anything wrong to suffer. Not sure about this friend now, right? And then he continues, chapter 5, verse 8. But as for me, I would seek God, and I would place my cause before God, who does great and unsearchable things, wonders without number. He gives rain on the earth and sends water on the fields. And then he continues in verse 17. Behold, how happy is the man whom God reproves. So do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. Hear that? So he's saying, you've done something wrong, go to the good God. Discipline's good, right? When you love someone, you discipline them. And that's what he's telling to Job. So, suffering, you must be sinning. That's what he tells him. Seek God where all good comes from. How does Job respond? Starting in 6:14. For the despairing man there should be kindness from his friend, so that he does not forsake the fear of the Almighty. Saying, what are you telling me? You should just be kind. And he goes on, teach me and I'll be silent. Show me how I have erred. How painful are your honest words, but what do they help me? I mean, think about it. Do you want somebody to point the finger at you when you're having a bad time? So Job's saying, sorry, I am innocent. And while most of your words are true, that all good comes from God, go to God and he will discipline you, and he's saying, they don't help me at all. What you're saying does not help the situation. So basically, Job then says, 7:11, therefore I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Again, a little more dramatic than I would be, but he's saying, I'm going to continue to cry out and complain. I don't think I've done anything. Show me what I've done wrong. Like, point to something specific. I'm going to keep complaining. An honest conversation, right? Again, I'm not I'm not saying his friend Eliphaz said the wrong things. I'm not saying he said it in a mean way. It's not perfect because I already told you it's imperfect people having an imperfect conversation, doing the wrong things, doing the right things. Job even says he's saying some things that are right, but he's like, well, you're not helping me at all. It's just not helping. A real conversation. Then I look at their second conversation. We're not there yet. Back one slide. That's in chapters 15 through 17. We'll look at them all just as a whole when we're done. So don't read that slide that was up there yet. If you memorize that, then you're amazing. So the second conversation with his friend Eliphaz. Good friend, says some bad things, says some good things. Starting in 15:4. Indeed, you do away with reverence and hinder meditation before God. For your guilt teaches your mouth, and you choose the language of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. And your own lips testify against you. Wow. Then he continues, the wicked man writhes in pain all his days, and numbered are the years stored up for the ruthless. His friend just stepped it up a notch. First, he says, shut your mouth, Job. You're condemning yourself by what you're saying, by saying you're innocent, by saying all this stuff. And then, even another notch, he starts comparing Job to wicked men, right? I mean, that's where he's going with it. He compares them to them. He's saying, numbered are the years stored up. The wicked man writhes in pain all his days. He's like, you can't escape it. I'm not sure how I'd feel about that if I was Job, especially when I lost all my children, all my livestock, all my servants. Because that's what happened before this. And now he's got boils all over his body, and his friend's saying, well, you got wicked boils because you're wicked. Harsh. How does he respond this time? Again, I have heard many such things. Sorry comforters are you all. Is there no limit to your windy words? Or what plagues were you that you will answer? I too could speak like you. If I were in your place, I could compose words against you and shake my head at you. Or I could strengthen you with my mouth, and the soles of my lips could lessen your pain. I want to point out that neither man necessarily have anything says is wrong yet. They're just being friends, right? Job again says, you are bad friends using your big words to condemn me. I couldn't do the same, or I would use my words to strengthen you and make you feel better. Remember, lost your livelihood, your workers, your family. Now you have boils head to toe. How would a friend respond? I'd like to think in however many thousand years we might have got a little better at that than saying at a funeral or something, well, you're suffering because you were bad. I mean, not the right thing to say, right? Not at all. But there's good news here. It's his friend and they're still talking. So he had a conversation, then with two other people, now this was the second, and then two other people, and now here's the third. They're still talking, so obviously they don't hate each other. They're still friends. And then the third conversation, chapters 22 through 24, this is the last part where he's talking with his friend Eliphaz. Starting in 22, verse 6. For you have taken pledges of your brothers without cause, and stripped men naked. To the weary you have given no water to drink. And from the hungry you have withheld bread. And then more in 9. You have sent widows away empty, and the strength of the orphans has been crushed. Then he says in 21, yield now and be at peace with him. Therefore good will come to you. Please receive instruction from his mouth, and establish his words in your heart. And if you turn to the Almighty, you will be restored. Wow. So, He actually softens a little bit now, and he says, okay, maybe you're not doing overtly evil things, but certainly you haven't done everything that God wants. That'd be like saying, I didn't do what I'm supposed to because I didn't volunteer at the food bank this week, or whatever. Certainly there's people you could have helped, and that's what God wants, and you didn't do everything you could possibly do. So he backtracks a little bit from you're a wicked, wicked man to we're all sinful because we don't possibly do everything that God wants of us at every second, which is true, and it's fair. And then he even softens more and he says, go to God, right? Yield now and be at peace with them. Therefore good will come to you. Please receive instruction from his mouth and establish his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you will be restored. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all of it. If you live a sinless life, which first of all you're not going to, I'm not saying that your life's going to be all peachy and wine and roses. God never promises that. He just doesn't. But if you go to God, you will be restored in his eyes, which is the only eyes that matter. And he will comfort you. He won't fix everything, but he will comfort you. Then Job continues. Job's pretty bold, and I like it. He reminds me of Peter in the New Testament. So starting in 23, starting in 1 even, then Job replied, even today my complaint is rebellion. His hand is heavy despite my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, he's talking about God, that I might come to his seat. I would present my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn the words which he would answer and perceive what he would say to me. Would he contend with me by the greatness of his power? No, surely he would pay attention to me. There the upright would reason with him, and I would be delivered forever from my judge. Behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. Goes on in 11. My foot is held fast to his path. I have kept his ways and not turned aside. I have not departed from the command of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. And then he goes on more in 24 verse 12 at the end of it. Yet God does not pay attention to folly. He does not even notice all the evil that's going on. He's not doing anything about it. And at the end of 24, now if it is not so, who can prove me a liar and make my speech worthless? These are big words coming out of Job. He's saying, I would go to God and reason with him and use my words. And then God would deliver me. He's saying, I have kept all of God's ways. And then he complains about the fact that evil men walk around and do whatever they want and God doesn't seem to notice. That's what Job's saying. And then he says, prove me wrong. He's pointing his finger. Prove me wrong. At his friend and at God. Prove me wrong. Big words. But I like it. To me, that's like watching The Godfather. You don't necessarily, you're like, ooh, Job said that. And in The Godfather, I'm like, ooh, Vito Corleone said this. Like, oh, I don't know if I would do that, but that's made for TV, that's made for movie. Like, I like it. He said it. I'm not saying read the Bible and do everything Job does. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's real people telling real stories, making real decisions, saying real things. And so far, God seems to be okay with it, right? Right? I mean, you may not agree. You may say, well, I don't know that one he was pointing his finger. He hasn't been struck down by lightning yet. That's all I know. Because in the Old Testament, that's pretty much how it worked, right? So, a few things to focus on from this, and now you can put up that slide. Good friends can call each other out, right? If you can't, you don't have a good friend. If you can't say to your friend, I know what you're saying, but I don't think you're right, and I'm calling you on it, then they're probably not your friend. You can be right and say the wrong thing. Job's friend proved that. Job proves that. You can say true things that don't help. You don't say every truth to every person you meet. It just won't go over well. Sometimes your job is simply to comfort. And at that, his friends at first got it completely right. For 7 days and 7 nights, they sat with him and wept and cried and just were with him. And this last one, this is important for us. This is what the Bible's for me, and this is why this is written like this. It's okay to question God. He can handle it. Right? He can completely handle it. Are you going to offend God? No. He's seen everything you've ever done or thought, or ever will do or thought. You can't offend him. And he still sent his son to die for you. It's okay to question God. Now, I'm not saying to go to every believer and curse God to them. But I will tell you this. If it happens, it's okay. We're not protecting God's reputation. If you say something stupid, it's not on God. I know some people will say that, well, that's making God look bad. It's like, he doesn't need us to protect him. We don't have to protect his reputation. We're the ones that screw up all the time, and he's saying it's okay. We don't. It's okay to question God. It's okay to yell at God. It's okay to cry out to God, because he can take it more than I can. I'll tell you, after 20 straight minutes, if you're yelling at God and yelling at me, I'm going to check out a little bit. God is not. It's okay to question God as often as you want. Now, eventually, I hope you get some answers and you figure some things out. But it's okay to do it. So we talked in the beginning about what makes a good movie, right? What makes a good character? So now I ask, what makes a good testimony? And if you don't know church lingo, that's basically the story of my life and telling it in such a way that it shows what God did in my life. So what makes a good testimony? Would it be, and I know this is some of you, and trust me, I'm not cracking on you. Would it be, you heard I grew up in church, and then when I was 8, I got baptized and I was saved, and then really there's nothing significant to tell in my life from this point on. God is great. Woo! Does that make a good testimony? And then so some people would go the other way, and they're like, you gotta spice that up a little bit. Well, no. I'm not saying it's boring. I'm just saying it's incomplete. You know why? Because I don't believe you. I don't believe that you never had any bad thoughts. I don't believe that you never did anything bad. I don't believe any of that. So why, when we tell a story, do we leave all that stuff out and show other people that we're just perfect and one day I said hi to God and then everything's been roses from here? Because they don't believe you. They want to watch The Godfather. They want to watch Vampire Diaries. They want to do that. They want to see real. They don't expect you to be perfect. They hate that. Let me just tell you now, when non-Christians see you act like everything's all fine and perfect or whatever, they do not like that. Because they smell baloney. They don't believe it. The book of Job shows all the drama, every little piece of it. Every little thought that Job has, we get to see it. I don't even know if he said it all or whatever, but it's in there. He's yelling at God. It makes it real. So, nobody in your life, and I have children, don't create drama on purpose because you want a good story. That's not what I'm saying. Well, yeah, Dad told me if maybe I'd steal a car once in my life and I'd have a good story to tell later. No. It's going to happen anyway. You don't have to create it. You don't have to make it up. It will happen. I know. And it will be part of your real story. So when you're telling your story later, don't leave those parts out. Because you're worried about making God look bad. Or you're worried about what people will think. It's part of the real story. It will make people want to listen and watch. They will also know if you made it up and glorified it to make it look better. Because you just know. And you don't have to protect God's reputation. You just don't. Tell whatever you did. It makes you figuring things out later that much more impressive. If I tell you 2 + 3 is 8, and then later on you learn that I got a nuclear physicist degree, it's that much more impressive that something helped me out on the way, right? I won't talk about how when I was 2 I learned math, and then when I was whatever I did no. I didn't know it, didn't figure it out, got better, something intervened in my life and made me amazing. because it didn't come from me. God uses real people to tell his story. Not fake ones, not perfect ones, not boring ones, not exciting ones, just real. That's made for TV. So share your real story with people. Share God's real story. Don't pick up just the flowery parts. It's not real. Nobody believes it. And why you do that is to give people hope, because there's no perfect person out there. You share your real story, you share God's real story, and you give people hope that it's for them too.
Yeah, I need you to fight for me when I don't know what I believe. Yeah, hey, why does everybody leave? Show me what it's like to dream. Hey, go, you the best. Hey, say it with your chest. Hey, yeah, wave 'em high, side to side. Let 'em know we gon' rise, we gon' shine. Hey, I need you to fight for me. Hey, I know you're my therapy. I know why we fight. It's just to know we tried. I eat drops. How do I start it off? Pulling all these hours, trying to keep it all clear. I got way too many thoughts, but in these expectations got me feeling stuck like